Consider the man who is peacefully sitting on a park bench, looking at a serene view of nature. Is this man at peace because he is thinking positive thoughts? No, he is at peace because he isn't thinking. He is absolutely relaxed and present. He is tapped into timeless peace. This is referred to differently across religions and spiritual groups. The being, the highest self, the Buddha nature, the Tao, etc. Ultimately, he is united with pure awareness and feels totally complete as he sits on the bench. In our day-to-day lives, we spend so much time thinking, and we tend to live our lives trying to calculate our actions. I should be making more money. I'm not productive enough. What should I say during this conversation? Do I look good in these shorts? Our minds love to think. You can see this for yourself simply by watching your mind throughout the day. But due to all of this thinking, we end up miserable. Most of the time, the moment we begin following any of these narratives, it leads to some negative story. And instead of being present and grateful, we end up feeling mad at the world. Then we might even feel bad for the fact that we are worrying and sad and start feeling hopeless about ourselves. And that's what leads to despair. Sometimes the thoughts can be delightful and positive, which is great. But if you're still watching this video, we both know that oftentimes the thoughts can feel kind of dreadful, kind of heavy. And when in despair, it can feel like straight torture. The way we got to this low vibrational, terrible state of being, where it feels like it's us against the world, is all because we decided to entertain our negative thoughts, or not even realize they were happening. This is how we easily become victims of our own mind. At our default, we are like perfectly clear water. But with all these thoughts and worrying, it's like a bunch of mud getting into the water and making it all cloudy. The only way to access the clear water again is to let the mud settle. We don't try to intellectualize and calculate how to extract each particle of mud. No, that only makes it worse. We simply observe the noise and let it pass. We let the mud settle. This means that the cure to all of this is to radically snap out of our narratives and emotions and return to the present moment, to be absolutely present from moment to moment. We must remain vigilant and attentive to exactly what we are doing, constantly in union with the pure awareness that observes. If we are walking, we are walking. That is where our undivided attention goes. This doesn't mean that anxiety and worry just go away. Sure, thoughts and feelings will still come up, we are human. But instead of feeding these narratives, we just observe them. We firmly decide not to give them any of our energy, and in doing so, we starve them. This is how we let our ego die and open up our being. As Eckhart Tolle says, when you are present, you can allow the mind to be as it is without getting entangled in it. So if at our default we are calm and peaceful, what is it that makes us forget this, start suffering, and feel in despair? Well, we have many voices within us. At one moment, we might have an I within us that wants to check our phone. In another moment, we could have an I that wants to turn on some music. Then an I that says, I want to complain about what that person said earlier in the day. These I's within us, these me's, are constantly changing, and all they do is present themselves to our mind constantly. And many times we aren't even aware of them. So this multitude of voices is referred to as legion, or the ego. This is because it is not one specific voice, but many voices inside of us. This multitude of egos comes in the form of desires, in the form of feelings, and in the form of thoughts. This is because we have 3 brains in charge of our 5 centers, as you can see by this diagram. The brains are in our mental, emotional, and motor instinctual faculties. So all of these I's within us may be controlling one of these centers from any brain at any given moment, constantly changing and being replaced by another ego. I explained this more in depth in my psychological revolution video, but I think we understand that each of these I's is a form of the ego taking control within us, and these are not reliable because they constantly change. And each of these, energy is required in order to feed them. If someone is feeling really anxious, for example, there is an I of anxiety that takes up lots of energy from that person. So by the time these egos have been fed enough to lead us into despair, we are supplying them with tremendous amounts of energy. This is why despair sucks. It really does, because it actually sucks our energy. It is tremendously draining, it is exhausting, and people say they are so drained. This is how. Through self-observation and uniting with the awareness, the same awareness of the man experiencing it when he's on the park bench. By being in this awareness and being aware of ourselves from moment to moment, and just observing the activity instead of being involved with it and sucked into it, in this way we stop feeding the egos. We stop allowing them to seem real, and we stop being so fascinated with what all of these eyes are presenting. This is why Muji says that we don't need something to be happy, but we do need something to be sad. It is when we start getting fascinated with all of the noise of the external world that we feel like we need something more, or that what we currently are is not enough. And as soon as we start feeding a narrative that presents itself to our mind, then we start going down the rabbit hole. And despair is the ultimate dungeon. Many of us constantly have this lurking feeling that we need something more, or that something within us is not enough. This is exactly how these eyes operate and control us, and pull us into deep, scary mental stories the more we engage with them. And this is how we fall into endless fascination with external objects. So now at this point, some people might be thinking, well, these eyes within us that tell us what to do, they are what give me a sense of purpose. They are what tell me what to do. If I don't have these eyes within me, how do I know what I'm supposed to do? If I am not all of these eyes within me, what am I? This is a very common question, a very common concern, because we might feel like there is nothing to fall back on if we aren't attached to these eyes, these egos inside of us. The idea of these eyes not being us, of not being identified with these, can even seem scary. But we need to remember, if we can observe these egos, then there must be an underlying awareness that can view all of these egos objectively in the light of consciousness. For a moment, let's consider the beauty of this pure awareness, because ultimately it is pure love. This is why samadhi and meditation can be so blissful. This is why creative hobbies are so relaxing. So the last thing we want to do is fear this awareness, because what we really want is to be in union with it at all times. And don't forget here, we are talking about the same eyes that lead us into immense suffering. So by uniting with the pure awareness that sees all of these eyes arise, instead of with the eyes themselves, then we are setting ourselves up to be in union with peace instead of never-ending worries. After all, we do need something to be sad, but nothing to be happy. And this awareness, in essence, is pure nothingness. And that is where we feel happy. It is the being. It is our true nature, our Buddha nature. A person totally lost in the art of drawing needs nothing because they are united with the being. This is our true nature, but when we forget this, we destroy ourselves. The mystic Osho said, the only thing that can destroy us is if we forget our true nature. In practice, this means we take the path of least resistance. The I's, the me's within us take control of our different centers in our mind, heart, and body. And in this process, we can actually see our body resisting in a way. Often we don't realize that we might actually be tense as we go about our day. Maybe our shoulders are tight, our eyebrows are furrowed, or our jaw is locked. This provides fertile ground for us to get involved with negative thinking, and it is a sure sign we aren't aware of ourselves. It's as though we are trying to fight our way through life and only thinking about what we have to do next. So ideally, we want to take the path of least resistance. And when these narratives or emotions or desires start trying to take control of us, we don't resist it, but rather reside in the awareness that can observe it happening. This is very important for us to do, because when these egos and thoughts and desires and emotions take control of our machine, we get taken out of the present. And any time we spend not being present is time wasted. If we don't want to waste our life and we want to be shielded from despair and act in accordance with our true nature, this means right now we must observe and be present from moment to moment. Instead of trying to fight the negativity in our minds, we relax our body and totally surrender to life's flow. For example, let's consider someone who is about to do a job interview, and before they meet the boss who will interview them, they feel very nervous and scared and start biting their nails and shaking their legs. This fear is certainly understandable, but instead of resisting this fear and this anxiety, trying to fight it, the path of least resistance would mean to totally relax the body and return to the present moment, to simply let go. Of course, we still experience the fear, but we watch it arise and don't involve ourselves with it. It's as though we are a rock that remains unfazed, still, and grounded no matter what. And this might sound very difficult, but once we realize that all of those fears and anxieties are an illusion trying to cover up our true nature, we realize that there is absolutely no use in giving into them. That is exactly what the ego wants, for us to give into it. And even better, over time, as we stay grounded and remember our true self, these egos get drained of their energy, and we avoid acting from yet another ego that wants to control us, and instead begin to slowly act more and more from our inner stillness, from our essence. Each of us has a true personality that manifests when our egos are totally absent. So when we stop resisting the egos and starve them by not identifying with them, we gradually open this true personality up. This is how we can stop fighting life and listen to the guidance from within ourselves, and thereby prevent despair. As the wonderful mystic and poet Rumi says, "The guidance you seek is already within you. Be silent and listen." All right, this all sounds great. Observe yourself, starve the egos so that they don't get the energy to bring you into despair. But maybe you're struggling with bigger issues in your life and you don't really see how this is supposed to help you. What if you're struggling to pick your career, or struggling to decide on where to move, or struggling with how to deal with a specific person? Well, we might be inclined to say, oh, you have a problem? Let's find a solution and work towards it. If we are full of worry and we are trying to figure out how to solve a specific problem in our life, it is much more likely for us to fall into despair during the process, and it's possible our goal could actually change, making success much more unlikely. This is the problem with operating from the ego. It's like building a house on sand, because whatever you build will be based on a faulty and unreliable foundation. So if we are struggling with something, or there is something we want resolved, whether it's financial problems or a difficult relationship, we first need to make sure we are operating from our being, from inner stillness. Otherwise, how are we supposed to trust any goals we set or decisions we make? So this comes first, before trying to plan the goal. As I've been mentioning, the best short-term fix is to center ourselves and be present, not succumbing to all of the noise of our inner chatter by taking the path of least resistance. This allows us to look within and gain some clarity. But for larger issues, where lots of tensions tend to arise within us, we can take some time to actually meditate on this specific problem. And the reason we must do this is because we have some inner conflict at play, and we must comprehend this conflict and eliminate it so that we can proceed forwards with clarity instead of operating from our ego. I forget who said this quote, but I recently read this somewhere. Comprehension replaces exertion. Exertion is the mind fighting against the mind, and that produces more antagonism. Comprehension silences the mind. So essentially, this means that instead of trying to find the solution to whatever it is we are struggling with and, intellectualizing about it, we understand the solution is already there. All we need to do is eradicate the egos blocking it up. For example, maybe somebody has a sibling or a friend or a roommate that they spend a lot of time with, and they are very frustrated by something that person is doing. So instead of finding a solution to change the other person's behavior or set a goal here, what we would want to do first is meditate and comprehend our feelings and inner conflict about the situation. The mission is to understand the barriers within ourselves before we try to plan any actions. As soon as the being provides us with any intuitive nudges or ways to act, that's it, we follow the being. That is what we need to listen to, and in order to do that, we have to get rid of the barriers of the ego. There is a ton of information out there about how to set goals and be more productive, but you will not be consistent with anything or feel peace as you go through the process if you are not following the being. As you can see, this is somewhat different from lots of new age teachings out there. People are constantly telling us to hustle more, work harder, set goals, plan, mark our progress. We aren't saying any of that is bad. We simply can't overlook the foundation from which we are operating from in the first place. If we are operating from the foundation of our ego, not only are we prone to changing our goal at any given time, but we could be hustling and making progress towards what? Building a master plan to rob a bank or burn down a house? Yes, it is fun to deploy our intuitive and creative abilities, but we can direct that energy towards something founded on feelings of the ego, like greed or lust, and dig ourselves into a hole, or we can operate from the being as our foundation, which is always reliable. This is how we keep hustling, keep goal setting, and yet keep going nowhere, only feeding the elements within ourselves that are completely undesirable, because that is what happens when the ego is our foundation. The point is, when you eliminate the egos surrounding a certain conflict you're going through, naturally the answer reveals itself. So in terms of eliminating these aspects in ourselves, I linked a video in the description below for a guided meditation. In this meditation, you take time to reflect on what egos you are being affected by. If you can intuit how to meditate on your egos on your own, great. But for beginners, I highly recommend the guided meditation that I linked for you below. Now, maybe you feel like this is a lot to manage, that you constantly need to be vigilant if you're listening to your being or if you're listening to the egos. Oh no, I have to make sure I'm eliminating my egos. This sounds like a lot of meditation and vigilance. So I get it. And before I finish this video, I recommend taking some time to unite with the essence within you so that you can remember yourself. Maybe you have an instrument you like to play. Maybe you do some drawing or some writing. Just take some time today to unite with a creative process that you enjoy so that you can experience the essence. This will help you build faith in your being and remember yourself. Do not forget that at your core, you have total serene peace that never goes away. So do not fall into despair. Life is what you make it. There's a story I like about an artist who painted beautiful pictures of this Italian countryside. These paintings had blue and mild distortions, and Europeans loved this art. But when people took a carriage into the country, they were disappointed because it didn't look the way that the artist painted it. Then someone found out that if you held blue glass up to your eyes and looked through it, the countryside looked just like how the artist painted it. Soon, everyone was looking through these glasses when they traveled, and their trips would be enjoyable and fun. Life is what you make it. When you start to feel the pull of despair, understand it's just the ego trying to put an artificial lens on your perception of life. No matter what you do, do not forget your true nature, and remember your essence from moment to moment. Thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace out.